Focused on quality and convenience, there isn't much you won't find at Marie's Mini Mart. Home-style breads, sandwiches, plus a variety of artisan breads and delicious single-serve desserts available exclusively at our Frecker Drive location. Marie's Mini Mart, with 25 locations wherever you go, there we are.
My guest today is the Emeritus Professor of History at Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. In 2019, he completed a political biography of Newfoundland Prime Minister Sir Robert Bond. And it's my pleasure to welcome the author of this meticulously researched and fascinating biography to the program. He is Dr. James Hiller. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much.
To begin, tell us about Sir Robert Bond's parents.
They were from England originally, and his father died in 1872 in St. John's, and his mother lived here for much, much longer. She only died in 1900, I think, and she was younger anyway by about 15 years. So anyway, he was of English ancestry, and he was always very proud of that, in that he always went back to the West Country every time that he went to England, and he would always go down to the ancestral village, which is called King's Kerswell, and he would often speak there. He was educated at Queen's College, Taunton, as it now is. It was called something else then, but it was a school for Methodists and others, really. So he was there.
He was in business in St. John's, and he left when he passed. He left his children quite a bit of money, didn't he?
Yes, he left about £1 million in today's.
Wow.
Well, I should say that it was $1 million in today's language, and it seems to have been sufficient to keep Robert and his brother in the manner to which they have been accustomed. But I think that there were 9 children, and only 2 of them survived, really, so as to live full adult lives. And that was Robert Bond and his elder brother George. But there was a fair amount of their property which was liquidated soon after his sort of death. But it's a question as to what actually happened to all the money. Oh. And that isn't really known.
Right. Now, Robert Bond, Sir Robert, was partly educated in England.
Yes, he was.
But I got the impression from your book that he didn't really feel all that comfortable outside of Newfoundland, that he was felt very much at home in Newfoundland, and didn't really like being away that much.
This is where he belonged, I think. And he put down roots, and he had strong roots here. And he was a bit of a Newfoundland nationalist as well. So he had great faith in the potential of the island. He didn't know much about Labrador at all, but he knew about the island, and he had great faith in that. And I would say that this is, yes, I would certainly agree that this is where he felt at home. That this is where he really belonged.
He aspired to be a lawyer, I believe, originally.
Yes, he did.
He took his law exams and failed.
Well, not exactly.
Not exactly?
No, because he never took his law exams.
Oh, I see.
he was frequently twitted about that by opponents in the sort of House of Assembly, and his explanations were never very convincing. But he said that he was never able to actually take the exams.
Okay. At any rate, he abandoned the idea of becoming a lawyer.
Yes, he did. But he was trained in the law. And I think that certainly shows in the way that he approached things.
Mm-hmm. But as we were saying, he was a Newfoundland patriot through and through.
Absolutely.
And I know that this would have put him at odds with the idea of Newfoundland joining Canada. Now, people thought that the idea of joining Canada was pretty much settled as far as Newfoundland was concerned in what they called the Confederation election, which was in 1869.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that this idea of joining Canada persisted for decades afterwards.
Yes, it certainly did. There were always those people in St. John's who thought that the best option for Newfoundland would be to join Canada, on the right terms, obviously. Bond was a nationalist. He was not in favor of Confederation, although he, in fact, always said in sort of public that it was a question of terms. He always said that. But he was, I think, very much opposed to it on the whole. How far that persisted after the First World War, I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. Because I do have the distinct impression that he changed a bit in the 1920s, that he became more sort of pessimistic, that he became more lacking in hope for the country at that time.
Mm-hmm. Now, I suppose the political establishment of that era must have had its eye on Bond, because he was encouraged to run for election, wasn't he?
Oh yes, certainly. He was a protege of Sir William Whiteway, really. Whiteway was very much in sort of favor at that time, which in the late 70s, early 1880s. Bond was seen as a coming man by the Whitewayite Tories, by the Whitewayite liberals, I suppose one should say. He was seen as a coming man, and I think that it was Whiteway who almost certainly saw that he was appointed Speaker, which was in 1883 or 4, or sometime around that time anyway. And I think that was almost certainly due to Whiteway's influence.
And that was his first significant role in government, wasn't it?
Oh, sure, yes, it absolutely was. Mm-hmm. But he was only Speaker for about a year. And he was then back in the rough and tumble of local politics, really.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the rough and tumble of local politics, there's an interesting person who crops up in the book. His name is Alfred B Morine.
Oh, right.
Now, I found him. I was fascinated by him because he wasn't a Newfoundlander. He came here from Nova Scotia.
Yes, that's right.
And managed to get himself elected to the Newfoundland House of Assembly. But in many respects, I think he was kind of a spy for Canada, or somebody who at least was keeping an eye on things here for the Canadian government. And he was also somebody who was pushing at every opportunity the Newfoundland politicians towards the idea of Newfoundland joining Canada.
Well, he certainly was that. I mean, he was a pro-Confederate. Mm-hmm. He was highly intelligent. He was also fairly devious, I think, and he was a bit of a plotter. And I think that he was able to be elected time and time again in Buena Vista Bay, but where he put down strong roots. But he was not very popular outside of there, actually. Mm. And he was often seen as a very divisive figure, partly because he was a Confederate, and partly because he was in touch with the Canadian authorities.
Well, exactly. Now, he was actually reporting to people in Ottawa about things that were happening here.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. How long that went on, I'm not sure. I have a feeling that again, in the First World War, that started to decline. Mm-hmm. That his influence in sort of Ottawa was not as strong as it had been. Hmm. But I think up to the First World War, he was probably quite an influential figure. Hmm.
Jim, I think most modern Newfoundlanders have a hard time coming to grips with the notion that there was ever religious sectarian strife in Newfoundland. But certainly in Bond's time, there were strong tensions between Protestants and Roman Catholics, and in fact, in Harbour Grace, I believe it was in 1883, yeah. There was an incident known as the Harbour Grace Affray.
That's right.
Where people were killed.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
And now, didn't Bond have something to do with kind of cooling things off after that event?
Bond took a strong pro-Protestant line mm-hmm. in the aftermath of the 1883 incident. But after that, he tended to always toe the line. That, in other words, he would always agree that each denomination ought to receive its fair share of patronage.
Now, just getting back to Bond and his ideas, he really believed that Newfoundland needed to broaden its horizons, so to speak, and not focus totally on the fishery as a resource, but also to focus on things like forestry and mining, because he saw those industries as having the potential for putting Newfoundland on a very strong economic footing. Is that right?
Yes, that is true. Bond was very much in favor of economic diversification. And in fact, that was a kind of a mantra since the 1830s. And it still is, of course. But there was also the feeling that some kind of diversification had to occur. And in sort of Bond's day, it was through this sort of railway, which was seen as the key to any kind of economic development on the island, that there was forestry, there was minerals, and that was the key, really. Mm-hmm. And also, although I should say that Bond was also keen on diversifying in the fisheries itself. He was extremely keen on sort of herring, for instance.
Oh, I see.
There should be more done with herring, mm-hmm. That there should be a new sort of industry formed through sort of herring catching. But it never really caught on.
You wrote in the book that you felt that he perhaps overestimated the potential for resources being the great answer to our economic problems.
Well, I think that he did. I think that he overestimated the number of mines that were here and the amount of sort of forestry. And I think that was the major thing. He was extremely keen on sort of mining. And there was one scheme that he had when he was premier, which was to have a smelter on Bell Island, where they would bring all the sort of minerals, and there'd be a vast kind of a smelter on sort of Bell Island, where all this would be sort of melted down. That never occurred, of course, and never really happened.
Right. Now the railway, his dream for the railway was to have it go from St. John's and deep into the inland areas of the island and end up in Port-au-Basque. This was to see the interior, the inland areas of Newfoundland built up and settled, wasn't it? That was his main goal.
Right, but it was not his idea in the first instance. It was the idea of Sir William Whiteway, actually. And before him was sort of Ambrose Shea, who was also very much pro building a railway. There were those in St. John's who were dubious about it, but on the whole, people went along with that. Bond was certainly a true believer in sort of building the railway, and he saw it as a way to bring Newfoundland up to the level of the other self-governing colonies. And he was extremely keen on that, actually. I should say also that Port-au-Basque was chosen as the sort of terminus rather than, say, St. George's, because it was off the French shore.
Oh, I see, yes.
And so that's why it was chosen, because it was not on the French shore. And so there could be no dispute about it.
Yes, and of course that was something that was in dispute for a long time.
Oh, it was in dispute for, yes.
Ultimately, I suppose Bond, when he was Prime Minister, received the credit for settling that dispute, but it was kind of an inadvertent...
Well, he did settle it in 1904. But it was not entirely due to him.
No.
I think it was also due to international movements on the part of France and on the part of Britain, which allowed this to happen, actually.
In 1890, I think it was 1890,
yes, yes.
Whiteway sent him to Washington.
I think it was Bond's idea, actually. And he was backed by various Water Street merchants.
But this was to investigate the possibility of a reciprocity agreement.
Yes, indeed.
With the Americans,
yes,
free trade, let's say.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And so Bond also came back to that in 1902, I think, when he was the Prime Minister.
And that's when he made his great mistake, wasn't it?
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
He retaliated against the Americans for not going along with an agreement.
The Americans soured on the agreement. That, in other words, in the Senate, it was defeated, or it would have been defeated. And it was largely due to the New England fishing interests. And so Bond was very much in a retaliatory mood at that point, after 1904, after 1905. And of course, the sort of British were quite appalled, because at that point, the sort of British were in the mood for a rapprochement with the United States. In other words, they wanted to not anger the United States at all, but to make concessions to the United States. So they weren't happy when one of their colonies began to be very uppity and to claim the right to retaliate against the United States, which the sort of British stamped on very, very firmly indeed.
Well, really, they were, Bond and Whiteway, let's say, they were going way outside their remit, weren't they? I mean, in getting themselves involved in external affairs, which was really Britain's area.
Well, I suppose so, yes. I think that it was unfortunate that there was no clear statement of the boundaries of what a colony could actually do. And that there was no statement of sort of fact about that. But nonetheless, it was said in the House of Lords in 1891, I think, that Bond had gone under very clear guidelines, that Bond knew what he was doing, and that he was not allowed to go beyond that. And he didn't when he was there. It was only when he went back a second time and a third time that he began to exert himself and to push the boundaries, as you said.
I want to go back, while there's time, I want to go back to 1884 and the bank crash.
Right.
Because this is really where I believe Bond developed, well, the Bond legend of being a statesman.
Absolutely true.
That's where it was born. The banks crashed, and he was the one who came to the rescue, I guess, or he was the one who found the solution.
That was in 1894, in fact, was the...
Oh, okay, sorry.
Was the bank crash.
Right.
But Bond, in 1895, first of all tried to negotiate a confederation with Canada. That failed. And he then, as a last ditch, went to the mainland to try to raise funds and to raise a loan, which he managed to do. I think, though, with the help of R.G. Reid, I'm almost sure that R.G. Reid, who was being paid in bonds of the colony, would have had a vested interest in trying to ensure that Bond succeeded. Anyway, Bond also gave his personal guarantee for a loan to the savings bank. Now, it was a fairly short-term loan, and it was not a huge risk, but nonetheless, I think that the fact that he had put up his own capital for this was something that was very much to his credit and was seen to be to his credit, and for which he received a huge amount of praise.
Yes, he certainly did. I mean, well...
Yeah. Sure, absolutely.
To this day.
Yes, indeed.
This is talked about,
right.
the great sacrifice that Sir Robert Bond made for his country.
But it was a short-term loan, as I say.
Yeah. You mentioned R.G. Reid. Towards the end of his, in his second term, I guess, he really, as Prime Minister, he really started to have doubts about the Reid Company, didn't he? And of course, the Reid Company were the people that operated the Newfoundland Railway and built most of the Newfoundland Railway, but they were involved in a lot of other ventures in the country at the time. And he was afraid, I think, that Bond was afraid that they would basically take away Newfoundland's autonomy. Bond
feared that Newfoundland might become a company colony.
Right.
And so he tried to curb the Reids insofar as he could, because they had these sort of petty harbor power plant, they had a large amount of land, they had the railway, they had all of these things, they had coastal shipping. And so he was very much in favor of making the Reids toe the line. And that is something which the Reids very much resented, of course. Now, where he did this most obviously was in central Newfoundland and the Grand Falls deal, when he curbed the reeds, and he in fact ensured that the reeds would be kept out of that area, and it would go to the Harmsworths, and that they would do any kind of forestry development that was on.
Well, Jim, look, it's been absolutely fascinating.
Okay.
And here is the book, Robert Bond, A Political Biography by Dr. James Hiller. I highly recommend it. It's a fabulous read. And I want to thank you for being on the program today.
Okay,
Jim.
good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Karl Wells' Point to Point, and we'll see you again next time.
If you want convenience, Marie's Mini Mart is here for you. A one-stop shop for a variety of products, home-style breads, sandwiches, plus check out our freshly baked artisan breads and single-serve desserts exclusively at our in-store bakery on Frecker Drive. With 25 locations, wherever you go, there we are.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media. To understand the world.
Okay, we're here. Let's go time.
Seek.
So what happens if we bring the full light of modern science onto ancient curses?
We service the entire world. It gives me goosebumps.
Explore.
There it is!
I didn't know that. That's all new.
Take risks.
Should I be concerned about my security?
Things can get ugly really quick.
Go further with National Geographic, now in free preview.
Sometimes, for a wish to come true, it takes a kingdom, because together is stronger. Tied tight, united we stand, in honor of one child's wish, to fuel the fire that will grant many more. Join the kingdom.
Hello, I'm Lloydetta Quaco. I'm here at the rooms where we just finished recording a Sharing Our Culture series. This is a place where you get to meet amazing individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds who are making significant contributions to the social, cultural, and economic development of Newfoundland and Labrador.
You're watching Rogers TV.
The following program is brought to you by Rogers Anyplace TV. Enjoy exclusive content for free. Visit RogersAnyplaceTV.com.
Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm Catherine Taylor, and my guest today is the perfect example of the rich storytelling culture of Newfoundland and Labrador. She says her love of the art of storytelling evolved from familial influences passed down from her father and her maternal grandfather. Isn't that the way it happens here in Newfoundland? We are known for our storytelling. And you know, she's doing an exceptional job of continuing the tradition. So I'd like you to meet this week's author, Ida Lenihan Young. And I'm going to bring her up on the screen right now to say hello to us. And let's see you there. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's truly a pleasure. And you're out there in CBS, which would be...
Yes, Conception Bay South.
Conception Bay South. Great names we have on communities here in Newfoundland for anybody watching. If you think that's a good name, boy, we can bring many others to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good and bad.
Good and bad. Yeah. I think there's been some picked up by some of the talk shows that have been really infamous.
Yes.
Anyway, Ida, you have been busy writing. You finished your book, The Liars, and it's the third book in a series. So I just have to start out by asking you, how does it feel to have accomplished that?
Oh, that's a hard question because I don't know. I just love writing, and I'm still humbled by the fact that people ask me to write more, and people are reading, and from all over the country and really all over the world. I've gotten messages from people from, across the big ocean and across Canada. It's wonderful.
Wow. And when you think about that, you're in Newfoundland and you're writing about books set in Newfoundland and Labrador, it must feel good to be bringing part of our culture to the world. Is that something important to you?
It is very important to me. And I think even if I had a very tiny readership, I would still continue to write about our culture because it is important. I think most of my love of history came from my grandmother and my grandfather. My grandfather often told stories, but it was my grandmother who was very quiet and had no, I don't know how to say it, but she was just so there, but still she was so strong and powerful, and people don't realize how much contribution the women had, especially, to our culture. Without the women, we wouldn't be here.
Oh, absolutely, Ida, because when you look back or you read any stories on the history of Newfoundland, it was not an easy life to come here. For example, my grandmother came from Scotland back when it was just, that was far more civilized than it was to come over here without running water, without sanitation and just the weather and living in isolation and, surviving through that. So you're right. And I think you have some strong women figures in your writing. And I'm sure based on this, that doesn't happen by accident.
No, and that was my choice because you can pick up hundreds of books from Newfoundland, and most of them are about the man or about politics, or it's about the generations of men, but they all had women by their sides, or maybe helping them in more ways than to become famous or to move along with our history. And I think it was the women were the cornerstones of all of that.
And it took a great deal of strength because they also dealt with a lot of loss of children and loss of family members. It was, it was a a difficult life growing up here, but obviously people persevered because we're here.
Absolutely.
And we're excited about the culture and we're excited to share aspects. Now, going to the history, you mentioned your love of history, and it's obvious in your books, and there is some history in there, even though these are works of fiction. Perhaps you can talk about that.
Well, I really wanted to bring the reality of Newfoundland to these books. So I did lots of research. I went to rooms, I went to different places in St. John's, some of the older places, and I did a lot of research and talking to people from archives, like even the archives in the Mercy Convent and places like that, things that we probably would take for granted, and just little tidbits of things that I found as I was researching for books. I marked them down and I went back and incorporated those things into, the second book and the third book.
Interesting. So there's quite a lot of research going along behind the scenes, because we see the book and we hold it in our hands. In fact, I brought it with me. I should have it in my hands right now. But, this is the part we see. And I think the writer's journey is sometimes what readers do like to know about. They do like to know that Ida did dig into things and bring this information forward. I mean, what percentage of your writing would you say that takes up?
Probably 80%. And
Wow.
it takes a long time to write a book. But the research that goes into it, if I want it to be accurate, I mean, I can sit down and chug out a book in a couple of months if I want it, without any kind of, believability or history to it. But I really want to incorporate the history of Newfoundland. And for example, in The Liars, when I was researching one of my earlier books, I came across an article about that happened in Labrador. And so when I came to The Liars, I was like, okay, how can I incorporate something that happened into Labrador with characters that are in Johns Pond in St. Mary's Bay? So then I had to do some more research, and I found some items that might help connect it. And so most of The Liars is actually based on true stories that I interwove together to bring The Liars.
Phenomenal. So it's kind of like, well, you could say knitting, as they say in Newfoundland. Who knit you? Who knit that? But
Who knit ya?
Who knit ya? And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, oh, wow, I love it. But that's what it makes me think of, that you're taking stitches and pieces and you're putting them together into this beautiful end result, and which you can tell in reading the book that there's so much of that there, and the way you move from place to place, or time to, the different time frames and so on. But the image of one of your characters plunging into cold water in Labrador, in winter, was just like, wow. I mean, crazy. So, I mean, you're able to bring that to life. You actually almost live inside those characters.
Absolutely. Like when I am writing a scene with a character, I am that character. And sometimes I'm not entirely sure what is going to happen till I'll get an idea halfway through the scene. And I'm like, okay, maybe I could do that. And then I'll write that scene to that. And then the next scene will have changed because of that. But I try to write on something that I know. I was actually in a car accident one time where I was underwater in the winter. So I remember how cold it was. So I was able to, I guess, kind of capture what happened to me, and in the form of Nancy in the book.
Yeah, and actually I do think many times we do draw on our sensory experiences in life.
Yes.
And bring that in and try to capture it. And sometimes I find it's even a great idea when something hits you, just to put it, now I put it in notes on my phone, but one time it would be in a book. Just get it down while it's fresh in your mind. How about yourself? Do you do that type of thing?
Absolutely. Sometimes I even, I'll go to bed and I'll think about something, and then I'm like, oh, I should get up and write it down. And I do, because sometimes in the beginning when I didn't do that, I would forget. And so like now, I just get up, I write it down, then I can go back to sleep. Whereas if I don't write it down, then I'm like tossing and turning. So I make sure that I make note of it.
Yeah, and it's very true. You will forget it. You say, no, I won't forget that. And in the morning you wake up.
I'll pinch myself. No, you won't forget that. I'll make you feel pain. You won't forget it, but I do.
I think the other method we have is much nicer. Write it down. Write it down when inspiration hits. My goodness. So when you mention you get inside your characters, sometimes that's described as the characters telling you what's going to happen. What do you say to that idea?
I would say absolutely, because I am the type of person, I don't plot out my book. I have an idea and I begin. And as I go, the plot might change, and the ending might even change. But I generally have like an idea formed on what I want to do, and I start writing, and then I'm like, oh, okay, maybe if I did it this way, or something will come to me when I'm in the character mode. And oh, wouldn't that be great if the character, did that or did this. And a lot of people when I wrote the first one, Being Mary Rowe, a lot of people said, oh, like she was our sister, she was our grandmother, she was our great aunt. So we want to hear more. So that kind of led me in, and I really got connected with the characters, and I really love my characters.
I think that happens a lot to authors, that they grow to love their characters, even to the point that you hate to kill them off. You gotta, they say, do something bad to your character, and then once you figured out what that is, multiply it by 10.
Well, in The Promise, I left the ending hanging, and people, like I had somebody, I was walking on a trail here in Kelligrews, and somebody stopped me. I hate what you did. And I said, what did I do? You killed her. I said, well, you don't know if she's dead or alive. Yes, you did. You killed her. I was like, just wait for the next book and see if she's dead. So people really get into it, right? Like I get email messages and messages online. Why did you do that to her? So it's good. I love it.
Oh, I love it too. I love to hear you tell me this, because it's exciting to hear that. And I think it's been in a way, it's been a technique used by writers too. If there are continuous books, you want to know what's going to happen next. You can't give it all away.
No, that's right.
Not if you're doing a series. You have to have some ups and downs and questions. But that's very cool, because I think that many times we do grow to love our characters. Now, something interesting you said you don't work with an outline, you work with an idea. And so do you think that obviously it's working for you? You're producing several books. Many people say they have to work with an outline, that it saves them time. But your take on that, again, is it's not required.
Not for me, but I'm not saying that's not the right way. And I actually did a class I did 2 classes with a well-known author who showed me how to do the plotting and stuff like that. But like even on this one, I can't seem to do it. I just have to sit down. I can't make myself accountable to a script of what needs to happen. I just have to let the characters tell me what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone in that. And I'm not sure that there is any right way, to be honest. I think that there are many right ways. Ida, whatever works for you, and it's obviously working. Tell me a little bit about your writing day, because I know you work full time, and so many writers do, but yet you write. So tell me how all this happens.
Well, I guess it's because I love to write, but I honestly don't consider myself an author. Like I write books, but I work, and I have grandchildren that are, here a lot. And I have a life, but part of that life is writing. And that's what grounds me, I guess. And especially during this pandemic, I found, worries went away if I sat down and wrote. And that's what I like about being able to write. I have, thoughts and ideas in my head, and it takes you away from life, takes you away from stress, And I don't stress. I don't have any, like if I write a book, I write a book. If I don't, nobody knew I was going to write a book. So it doesn't matter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Only yourself to answer to initially.
Yes.
Although you have a lot of people out there that are
demanding.
They're going to be a bit more demanding. So maybe now you do have to continue on and get those books written. There might be a little
I
more
don't feel that pressure, though. I don't make myself feel that pressure.
Oh, that's good. So now if you write, how does it flow for you? Say you write 1,000 words and that's your output for the day. The next day, do you revisit that or do you continue on? What's the pattern for you?
I'm a revisitor, which is very time consuming. I remember when I wrote my first book, even when I got to like the, page 180, I had to read 180 pages to see what I did. So it was after that I started writing scenes, and that makes it a bit easier. Like I know what to see. And so my next book now, I have the final scene done. Now it might change, but I don't have to, like, I only have maybe 25,000, 30,000 words written, but the final scene is done. So I know what, I know what's going to happen down the road, but I just got to, write some scenes to get me there. So it's much easier now doing scenes. However, before I would, I'm not educated in the art of writing. It's just something that I do.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You've got an end point, so you know where you're going. It's just like you can't go to the airport and just say you want a ticket. No. The first question is, well, where would you like to go, ma'am? So I think you've really hit on something by having the end scene. Even though you may not have everything done out, you know where you're going.
And I actually did that for my last two books. I had the ending written and then I wrote to the ending. It's like I can see the finish line and I have something to get, like I have a place to get to. So that helps me.
Absolutely. And even in writing a book, when you say there's so many pages and you have to go back and read, remembering details, continuity. Continuity is a big thing, like were the eyes brown, were the eyes blue? Was he this tall or that? So do you do have character sketches or is all that stored in your magical head?
Well, I've had a seat of my pants. So in my first book, the one being Mary Rowe, I had, there was a scene that I needed to have, but I couldn't make it fit because Mary's mother was a teacher. So I went to the WANL, the Writers Association of Newfoundland, and I had some feedback. And the person that gave me feedback, he said, "You are God in that story." And that really struck me. I'm like, I'm God. Why did she have to be a teacher? Like the mother could have been a nurse. So I changed that, but that meant I changed several scenes, but just like references to it. But it really struck me that I'm God in the book. So I can do whatever I want with the characters. And that, really was like, woohoo. I know what I am.
It's exciting.
So it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an exciting thought. You are in control. You can do all kinds of mean things or nice things.
Yes.
Bring other people in, make complications. So it's really fun. And I think that dynamic you've hit on is something that writers love. They love that kind of thing. And it's exciting to make up these stories. You mentioned WANL. For anybody who might not know, that's the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's an organization here to support writers and certainly for writers to be a member. There's incredible information and support there. And so I don't know if you have any comments you might want to make about WANL while we're on the topic.
Well, like I said, I'm a member. I get their newsletter all the time. They have a web page, and actually somebody reached out to me because my name was on their website, and somebody reached out to me for help with something that they were doing. Had nothing to do with like writing or being an author, but they needed help with something, and they reached out to me because of that website. So like it's very good. I took advantage of the mentorship program. So like my first book I wrote, I had a mentor and he looked at the book and he said, well, you're a little bit too nice. You need to be a little bit meaner and things like that. And I'm like, yes. And then he said, you're God. And I was like, okay, look out, characters, here I come. So Wendell it's very good. No matter if you are beginning, if you are a seasoned author and you can help somebody else, it's just a wonderful association.
Absolutely. And it's good just to remind people that it's out there. Membership is very reasonable and take advantage.
Absolutely.
Go online and check it out. We've told you about it now. Now, also, when it came to, it's one thing to write a book, it's another thing to publish it and get it out there. Can you tell me a little bit about how that unfolded for you?
Well, my first book, I was with a publisher that no longer exists. So when I came into the historical fiction series, I was, I was publisherless. So I went to Flanker Press and I gave them my manuscript for Being Mary Rowe, and they were very eager to publish, and I've been there ever since. Like they're great. They're great support, and I just find it's lovely to have a publisher because then there's things you don't need to worry about.
Certainly.
They do, cover art and editing and all that sort of stuff. You just gotta, get it to them and let them polish it up and send it on its way.
And there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. Many people self-publish and deal with those things themselves, but it's nice to have someone holding your hand if that
Absolutely.
works out or that's the direction you want to go in. How did you feel about your cover when you saw it? Let's say The Liars. How was because I really like I love that cover. How did you feel about it?
I really, really loved it. So when I did the story, was the only one I had input into the cover. So I said, to me, I would like the characters to be, like this. I don't care who they are, but this is what I envisioned for the cover. And when I got it back, it was awesome. So I just, I'm floored by the 3 covers. They've been amazing.
Mm-hmm. And in your opinion, how important do you feel a cover is to a book? Big question.
Oh, it's absolutely integral. I mean, that's the first thing. If nobody knows your name or anything about you, and they look at the cover, it's what's going to draw them to even just open it up and look inside. So It's integral. It's something we really should pay attention to. It's not a secondary thing; it's a primary thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think today, in the way the world is, people are so quick to look at images and, push the screen next, that cover does have to jump out. And when you are with an experienced publisher, I expect that they get a pretty good sense of what's working and what's not.
Yes, absolutely.
Now,
you have to learn to let go. So there's things you have to, you have to let the experts tell you. So I just gave them the idea and they came back with this. It wasn't exactly the idea, but it was better. So I really, really liked it.
Excellent. And your point about you have to learn to let go is very true as well. In so many ways in writing a book, at some point it has to go. It has to go in the hands of another editor who may change things or suggest things. So it's that feeling sometimes that writers have of the personal connection and the ownership, but just having to let the baby go a bit. Was that hard
Absolutely.
for you?
No, actually it's not. You get it to the edge of the nest and then here you go, get out. And whatever happens, and it's worked. So I'm lucky that there hasn't been very many, actually, I don't think there's been any changes other than a couple of cursory, there's too many she's at the beginning of those lines or things like that. So.
Well, which speaks for the work. It speaks for the work that you put into the writing and the editing process yourself.
Yeah, I am very technically. I don't know. I'm very minute, so I try to have it as good as I can before I send it in.
Right, and now, how about for not publishing, but promoting it? How involved are you with your book promotion?
Very, very involved. I have an Instagram account for my author. I have an author page. I have a website. All that comes at a cost, of course, and it comes with time. I have a Twitter account and things like that. So from social media perspective, I'm very active. I have done like two signings a week at places in St. John's. I've gone across the island. I've read in libraries. Anywhere I'm asked to go, I've done online Zoom meetings with, writing groups and things like that. So if I'm invited and I can do it, I will do it. And if I can, get out and sign and meet the people, I love it.
That is nice, because writing is done in such isolation, and when you can actually get out and have that interaction with readers and audiences, I think is a very nice thing for a writer.
Well, I mean, if you don't have readers, then where you're going to dry, your writing talent is going to be dried up and gone. You have to have your readers, and you have to respect what the readers want, and you have to respect that they're there and they want to meet you.
And it all takes time in between the writing and managing social media takes time. And I think you do a lot of readings as well online. In fact, you've got one coming up tonight.
Yes, yeah.
And you have people who follow you through that. So it's a wonderful combination of many things that you're doing to make this all come together. Did you ever imagine that you would be doing this?
No, not at all. And even I think I was the first book. I don't know if I was like the first, maybe not across the world, but the first book that I know of that was released during the pandemic. So I had my book launch during the pandemic. Myself and my daughter were here in the kitchen, and we treated it as if there was hundreds of people there, and hundreds of people came. So it, online, virtually, but it has really impacted book sales and things like that. But like the pandemic is the pandemic. Your book is not the most important thing in the world. So
no, and
we just have to realize that.
We move on and we find ways, and this being one of them. This show is one way I can get writers' messages out. And Ida, it's been a delight to talk to you. It's really been wonderful, and to share insights with you. And we're just ready to wrap up now. And very quickly, is there anything on the horizon for you coming soon that we should know about?
I got 3 projects on the go. I have a 4th in the series. I think it's called now a quadrilogy. I'm not sure what but my first 2 characters, Mary and Peter, never really had an adventure. So I'm I'm 30,000 words into that. I also have my mom's story that I'm working on, and I just have another piece of fiction that I did during when I was doing my 2 courses. I started something and I enjoyed it, so I'm going to continue with that. So looking forward to 3 more books.
Wonderful. Well, Ida, keep on writing, and I hope you'll be back to talk with me again and share more stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Day. My pleasure. Bye now.
Bye.
Call the Rogers TV viewer